Hi, people. What a happy, beautiful summer. Well, I'm televising this. It's the day after 4th of July, and it was absolutely a beautiful day, although hot here in Annapolis. Well, anyway, I want to talk to you about 3 short years. 3 short years that may well be the most pivotal years in all of doll history, and we're lucky to be able to discuss that today with examples of that period because of the wonderful collecting enthusiasm and research and zeal of Ruth Nievergelt of Switzerland, who assembled this wonderful collection that we're going to be assembling, that we're going to be auctioning. And I have them here. I've had the joy of working with them in producing the catalog for it and doing all the research. And it's one of the things that happens that I'm the fortunate benefactor of, I wish any of you could share in this, is that when a collection comes in that has a particular focus, suddenly I'm seeing dolls differently because I'm seeing them in relationship one to another. Well, I'm going to try to share that with you today, what I've learned from working on her collection. And it's really funny because although many of the dolls Ms. Nievergelt collected from us over the past 30 years, and you may recognize a lot of them, you know, the ones that got away, the ones you wanted, but I'm seeing them now juxtaposed one to the other, and it just brings it all to fore. Well, the movement I'm talking about, the little 3-year period, stretch it to 5 if you want to on either end, but it began about 1908 in Germany, and as part of a bigger picture, as doll people, as doll collectors, doll scholars, we always tend to want to put ourselves in a little funnel of, you know, we see our doll history and we don't see the world on either side of it, what was happening. But it's really important to do that because it gives you a whole different perspective on your dolls. And in this time in Germany was going on what were referred to in various ways as the art secessionist movements. And this was a way to break away from the traditional, to try to find new ways of expressing things, to have them be more in tune with the contemporary life. This extended even into the doll world. The dolls that up until this time had been seen as works of art, of beauty, of something for a child to aspire to be like or to want to emulate. And suddenly people were starting to see things differently. They were saying, well, maybe that's not what it is. Maybe it should be a companion, or maybe it should express what children actually look like. Maybe it should express their moods. Some of the original art exhibitions that were held in Germany that are so famous as introducing what we call the art character doll actually were designed to introduce truly art dolls. And they were not the type of dolls that children ever would have played with. They were representations of art forms that were only a few fine steps away from a bronze sculpture or something like that, but done with a new feel to them of what the new world was like, new techniques, new expressions. This filtered down, if you will, into the doll world, and people began to see how perhaps dolls should be seen a little more differently too than they had been in the past. And so in this period, beginning in 1908, and I love this too, because then we get into art, but then you also get into history, and I just people's interactions with each other, and that's pretty fascinating too. So now, 1908 in Munich, at the Hermann Tietz department store, he was sponsoring one of these exhibitions of the new art dolls. And there, Marion Kaulitz, a doll maker, represented her dolls. And we're looking right here at one of the Marion Kaulitz dolls that was represented. And look at the face of it. Look at the character face. This is like a composition, a very, very thick molded composition, not a hollow composition, and with a textured finish and artistically painted. One of the things that is common with a lot of these sculptors or doll firms you're going to see coming up, and I looked up some this morning so I could read these to you because it's the first time I've kind of known it vaguely, but seeing it concretely is important to me. Marion Kaulitz had dolls that were sculpted by Paul Volsanger. He had his degrees from the Munich Academy of Bronze Arts, and he was most famous for all of his bronze work, including one very, very famous award-winning large bronze of the blacksmith. But he took time to sculpt a doll head for Marion Kaulitz. One of the reasons we don't know a lot about these sculptors who did this work is that they were, this was below them to be doing a doll head. And so they kind of kept their names quiet, and that's why only some of them are becoming known as the decades have gone by and research has shown who these actual sculptors were. Cameron Reinhardt will come to in a minute. Their doll heads were done by Lewin Funk, who was from the Royal Academy of Arts in Berlin, and also by Karl Krosner, very, very well-known sculptors, both of them. The early work of Steiff, the early cloth dolls of Steiff, for example, were designed by Albert Schlapsies, who, excuse my pronunciation of the name, who was a very, very famous painter, illustrator, really worked in the fine arts field. All of these people did. Even people like Franz Schmidt. Did you ever hear of Albin Scheller? Well, Albin Scheller was a sculptor who worked for Franz Schmidt. So these were all people that, when we talk about dolls, we're just talking about the makers, the manufacturers, the sellers of the dolls, the people who own the company. But behind all these dolls, there's a lot of artistic work going on. And one of the ways I propose that someone who wants to get into a whole different area of either collecting dolls or researching them is to find out more about who the sculptors were of these wonderful art dolls and put together a work on that. It would be a great, great gift to the doll world if you could do it. Okay, so anyway, Marion Collitz presented this doll. In the meantime, Kathy Cruz is presenting her early character dolls. Both of them were using the term art character dolls or character dolls, so there was a little controversy going on there. And then came along a company that had been busy making pretty bisque dolls, the classic standard pretty bisque dolls, and that was Cameron Reinhardt. And that's why the whole thing grabbed the attention of the general public, because now it had come outside of the heady world of the fine artist and was coming into the commercial world. It was really interesting. So Cameron Reinhardt, and this was only discovered by Marianne and Jürgen Cieslik about 20 years ago. All their extraordinary research they did on German dolls and German doll history, authentic, really detailed research. And they were able to contact and find members of the family and found documentation as to who the actual sculptor of the original Cameron Reinhardt series models were. And that was Professor Lewin Funk. And if you're interested in that book, German Doll Studies, you'll find some great information all about this, photographs of him, connections with the family, the whole thing. So here, if you as doll collectors, I guess I ramble off sometimes, but if you as doll collectors ever feel you have to justify the worthiness of your collecting, and Lord knows every one of us has, through the outside people, you can just tell them, you know, our works were sculpted by fine artists who won medals and awards in their fields of fine arts throughout the years. So our dolls are not only historical playthings and cultural artifacts, but they are historical works of art as well. Well, Cameron Reinhardt introduced their series of character dolls, and they introduced them in 1908, 1909, and then again, like they appeared in 1910, but they were a flop. They were an absolute flop. People didn't buy them. No one, they analyzed it, they tried to figure out why they didn't buy them, and they couldn't come to conclusions. I will tell you, at the end of that 3-year period, and they had produced big quantities of them. At the end of that 3-year period, someone wrote a report about it, and I have the quote because every time I read it, it breaks my heart. In the warehouses of the factories, thousands and thousands of doll heads were smashed without mercy, making it a gigantic heap of broken bisque. So the ones that are left, we need to cherish and love. Now, Cameron Reinhardt offered their Painted Eyes series, and those were the first models from their art character series. And we have here 3 examples in very, very rare large sizes. They made them in sizes going down to like, I think 6 or 7 inches. I've seen them that small. But they also came into this larger size, very, very rare to find. Clearly, common sense will tell you these were the more expensive of the variations of them. Some they introduced and they gave a name to, but they all had wonderful wonderful characteristics. And I want you to look at them because let me tell you a little bit about their painting, because this is really, to me, it's really important. If you want to really appreciate these dolls, I propose that if you have one in your possession or know a friend who has one, sit down and write a description of the doll. Write a description of, well, let me see. Oh, gee, she doesn't have lashes, does she? Well, write a description of her brows. Well, it's just one angled stroke. Well, what about accent dots and nose and eyes? No, gee, they don't have many of them. These dolls, the painting of their faces was so simple compared to others I'm going to show you in a few minutes. And so you have to ask yourself, where is this extraordinary beauty coming from, this artistry? It's all in the sculpting. It is in the sculpting. In no other dolls are you going to find such great definition that you're going to find in the expressiveness of the characters of these dolls. And it's something that's really, really worthy to look at. It's very strong with me because I have to catalog them, and every time I sit down to catalog one of these, I'm always taken on comparing them to other German dolls, certainly French dolls, that have dramatic painting of the features, but not the art character dolls in that small little 3-year period in Germany. Cameron Reinhardt had theirs, and their dolls were actually made in the porcelain firm of Simon and Halbig. But Simon and Halbig also had their character series as well. And they had this girl, they had this wonderful little boy, and I just discovered it. I didn't know it when I was cataloging him, and I just found it this morning that he's actually pictured in Cieslick's German Encyclopedia, almost a full page. He's a wonderful, wonderful example of one of their character models. So these are great examples. And then this one, and look at her face. It's different. It's different somehow. Who do you think made this? Someone you would least expect, because you think of this firm being selling zillions and zillions of dolls, the Armand Marseille firm. And you think of them being a bulk producer of dolls because that's what were mostly sold all over the country, all over Germany, all over England. Their AM390, their AM370, but they also had a wonderful collection of their painted eye models. Very, very rare to find. And this eyes, I'm going to hold them up next to the Cameron Reinhardt so you can see that they just have a completely different look to them. It's more like there's a greater emphasis on the whiting of the eye. I don't know. You have to, again, when you sit down and do your catalog description, then you will really start to pay attention to what might make one different than the other in their modeling. I know what you will tend to do is you'll tend to immediately look at costume because that's the first thing that will strike you, or a face, but without honing in on the details. But I try to always emphasize to you to hone in on the details. Well, these art character dolls floundered. They worse than floundered. They flopped. They flopped big time. There is a report that was done. The famous E.W. Mathis store in Berlin, which was a major exporter, this is of toys and dolls, and they had this report was published about them, which is very interesting. In 1909, Berlin character dolls, these dolls, the art character dolls, that's what they're saying, were 10% of their sales of all of their items, which was a lot for a specialty item. Remember, they carried all kind of toys. 10%. By 1912, it had gone down to 3%. This was a major financial loss for these doll manufacturing companies. Major, absolutely major. Okay, the dolls flopped. What are they going to do? What can they do to save their companies, to save their market? And they've had all these wonderful models made, but how can they make them more pleasing to the public? Oh, I have an idea. Let's give them glass eyes. Let's give them pretty wigs. Let's give them more the type of thing that children seem to respond to. So all of these wonderful character models started to appear thereafter and were fairly successful. Well, I mean, World War I certainly came in and kind of blew things up, so you don't know if their kind of lack of really holding a market for a long time was due to not liking them or to the war, and it was probably more the war because people loved these dolls. This is now what they wanted again. They wanted these character dolls. They loved the expressiveness, but they wanted to see them with glass eyes. And so all of these same companies that had been making the ones with painted eyes, now they brought them out. And they are absolutely wonderful. There's 2 of them here that we don't know who the makers are. It's left up to more research to be done, and it's this lovely girl right here. And it's this lovely girl right here. Both of which I will tell you that Ruth Nievergelt purchased from us over the years, and we didn't know who made them then, and we still don't know. So there's so much research still left to be done within the doll world. Some wonderful, absolutely great examples. I still I think like from a doll collector point of view, this wonderful doll by Hertel and Schwab in the back is great and expressive, and you really like it. I can't always help but wonder in the back of my mind, why would a child want that doll? But I don't know. Now, this whole movement came about from people like Kathy Cruz, who wanted to create a doll that was something that you could cuddle, you could feel. You could relate to it as a child. And to her and the world she came from, all of these dolls were distant from a child. There was a distance. And that's how her whole world developed too, and her whole market developed. I was thinking about the different makers who were involved in all of these doll makers, and if you think about it, Steiff, Kathy Cruz, who made holdable dolls, cuddling dolls, this type of thing, they're the firms that lasted and lasted and lasted. They evolved, their product evolved, but there was something about them that was important, that the material they were made of. The makers, the firms that were involved in the making of these dolls, I went and read Cieslick's German Doll Encyclopedia, because they'll put things like, for each company, they'll have a year, and then the things they did in that year, and the things they did. And every single one of these companies, without exception, because they were men running them, and they were so excited about any kind of technological advance they could make. The introduction of celluloid, new ways of jointing the doll body, different types of making eyes sleep. Anything that was a mechanical was technical. This was where their whole focus was. And the women who came into the doll market brought this entirely different perspective on what a doll should be and what its meaning to a child would be. So many changes were going on here. I try to think that the whole doll movement was affected by this art secessionist movement going on in Germany, where people were throwing off the traditional and bringing in the new. But it was also as much influenced by women becoming more involved in, I guess, deciding not to stay in their place in the house, that wasn't their only role in life, but that they had a distinct vision of how children played with toys or how children related with their dolls. And they wanted to bring that into their business acumen into the marketplace. And that's why their dolls had a particularly unusual focus to them. Okay, so we have now, I'm hoping the camera can pick this up before we change and bring some other dolls up. But when I want you to look back and forth on like the faces of one of these dolls, of the painted eye, and then the faces of the glass eye, and look at the difference. All right, now I want you to look at the painting of the lashes and the brows and the shading of the lips, accented nostrils and eye corners. Look at this one. There is nothing that way. Very, very simple. One line up above the eyes, one dash of an eyebrow. The painting becomes completely different when they moved back into the glass-eyed dolls. My good fortune in being able to work with collections like this is to see a group of them all together assembled, and then you just realize how really significant that is. And you can do it too. Just try to catalog a painted eye doll, and you will agree with me. I say that without hesitation. Now I'll show you another group.